Good morning. Thank you. Okay, so we're in the Mamar, Derech Mitzvosecha, the mitzvah of getting rid of chametz and eating matzah. The second page in the booklet, it's the first ois. Now on the second page of the booklet, it's 14 lines from the top. That's where we're up to. The line that begins with the word etzloi. So he's explaining the difference between emunah, the way we have been commanded, and emunah, the way it's accepted and it's meant to be believed by everybody else in the world. So he explained that emunah in general is to believe that Hashem creates the world, Hashem sustains the world, and that's something which you don't really need emunah. If you think of things in a pure logical way, in a way that you're searching for the emes, objective, then you'll see clearly how Hashem gives life to the world. So what is this emunah? This emunah is much higher, that Hashem gives life to the world from a level that's called Sovev Kol Almin. So let's now he's going to sort of translate that in simpler words. So again, it's the line that begins with the word etzloi, page 2 in this booklet. Ve'nei k'mei haguf shutafel neshama. The way Hashem gives life to the universe is not the way the neshama gives life to the body. It's much deeper than that, much greater than that. Yes, we use that as a mashal, but in reality, it's much greater. And what is the difference? The guf is tafel and neshama. The guf is secondary to the neshama. Secondary doesn't mean doesn't exist, doesn't mean it has no significance. It means it's secondary compared to the neshama. In fact, you might be familiar with this term in halacha, that when you're eating food, that there are two brachas in this food. And the question is, do you make both brachas? Do you make one bracha? Which of the two do you make? So in halacha, there's a term which is ikar and tafel. Ikar means the primary, and tafel means secondary. So I guess if you have cake, and there's a little bit of fruit inside the cake, do you make borei mina mezainis, or do you make borei prihates? Or do you make both? You make mezainis. So the reason why you make mezainis is because even though there's also fruit there, but in halachic terms, the fruit is tafel, it's secondary to the mezainis. So the main thing is the cake, and the fruit is secondary. So the word secondary implies, of course, it has substance, it has some importance, but compared to the cake, it's secondary. That's the way it's with the neshama and the guf. The guf has its substance, and the neshama is just so much greater and so much more important than the neshama is what gives the guf all its faculties and its ability to function. So the guf is tafel to the neshama. Mikol makom, nevertheless, uyesh b'fnei atzmei. We're starting with the line etzloi, that's 14 lines from the top. But the neshama has its own sort of substance, own identity. And the reason is, the source of the guf is not from the neshama, which means the neshama gives life to the body, but the neshama doesn't create the body. So after 120, when the neshama leaves the body doesn't disappear. It still exists, which means the existence of the body is not totally dependent on the neshama. It can exist in its own right. So the body has its own identity, and the neshama has its own identity, but the neshama is much greater than the body. So the difference between Hashem and when you compare it to the neshama is The neshama gives life to the body, but doesn't create the body. Hashem doesn't only give life to the world, he creates the world. And without him, the world couldn't exist. So if Hashem would remove himself, the world would become non-existent. But when the neshama removes itself from the body continues to exist. Because the body is not created by the neshama, elemetipas of the imay. The body is physically created by the father and the mother. But the heaven and the earth and everything that's in it, shekol atzmusam, their entire essence, is ayin, they were created out of ayin, out of nothing, and without Hashem's energy in them, they would be non-existent totally. And betela mamish, that totally bottled shemesh should be guf kadra shemesh. This would be like the light of the sun inside the sun. We'll leave that for a moment. So in other words, in terms of bittul, these are two levels of bittul. The guf is bottled to the neshama. That's true. The guf is subservient to the soul. And if I want to move my hand moves, and my feet walk, and the organs in the body, they are aligned with the neshama. Whatever I want, that's what the organs do. Because the neshama is the ikar, and the body is secondary. But you can't compare that to the bittul of the world and Hashem, because that is something different, that if Hashem would take away his energy for a moment, the world couldn't exist. So its very existence is because of Hashem. So it's a higher level of bittul. Let me just see if I have it in the back here. I just want to give you the terms of Chassidus. The terms of Chassidus for these two things are, one is called bittul hayesh. No, we don't have it. Yeah, I do. No. Sorry. Well, we have the terms here, but I did not put this term down. Okay, that was a mistake. I'm going to write it down on the board. Question is if we have what to write it with. Pen? No. This? So where's the real deal? In the drawer, lady. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So one term is called bittul hayesh. This is bittul hayesh. Yes. And the other one is called bittul see. Oh, sorry for that fancy tzaddik. A little too fancy. Let me just straighten them out. The C was the C was. Bittul hayesh means there's something there, but it's bottled to somebody higher. And bittul mitzvos means there's nothing there except for that which is higher. It's total bittul. Use another example. Let's say in terms of serving Hashem. The person has the Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara is attracted and drawn to do something that's an Aveira. And the person is the kind of person that is totally in control. He can control and discipline his Yetzer Hara. So whatever you're not allowed to do, he won't do, no matter how much he wants to. Whatever you have to do, he will do it, no matter how difficult it will be. That's called bittul hayesh. We have a Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara has its own desires, and yet it is subservient to my nefesh elokis, and my godly soul controls it. When a person reaches a level where they're no longer attracted, drawn to things that are negative. Everything that I want is only positive and what Hashem wants. I don't have any desire for things that are negative. That's called bittul b'metzias, that it's total bittul. There's nothing else there other than the desire to serve Hashem. So again, the two terms, bittul b'metzias, yesh means there's something there which is outside, separate from the higher, and yet it's batul, it's subservient to the higher one. Bittul b'metzias means there actually is nothing there other than that source, the higher source. So again, the neshama and the guf is bittul yesh, because the guf has its own identity. And where do we see that? Because when the neshama leaves the body, the guf continues to exist. The guf is physical, material. It was created through physical material by the parents, and the neshama enters the body. It's invested in the body. It gives life to the body, but the body has its own identity. And the same is with the world, the way other people without the unique amunah that was given to Yidden, the way other people see the world as well. There is a world, there's a universe. In fact, this universe has its sort of laws of nature and whatever it has, but Hashem is involved and takes care and leads, and he's in charge. But there is, as Hashem is invested in the universe, like the neshama is invested in the body. So therefore, the world has its own independent identity. When we look at the world from a Torah perspective, it's bittul b'metzias, that the world was created by Hashem, and every second continues to be created by Hashem. And if Hashem's energy wouldn't be there, it could not exist even for one moment. And therefore, the bittul is total and complete. Let's continue to see the words inside. This is the deeper meaning when it says in different places in Chumash, ein oid, there's nothing else besides him. Again, the normal way that some people interpret this pasuk, the simple way is, ein oid means there's no other God beside him. But the deeper meaning is no other existence besides him. She'ein afilu davar tafel, it means there's not even something secondary. In Hebrew, oid means another thing. I want to say oidapam, another time, another thing. So we don't even look at the world as if it was another thing. There's Hashem. He's the big thing. He's in charge. He's the superior and supreme being. And there's also another thing, which is the world. So he says, no, ein oid, there's not even another thing. It's not even anything secondary. Rak le'einenu, only the way we perceive it with our eyes, histir, Hashem hides his presence. Li'isnira ki'ilu heim nefrodim. It should look as if the world is separate from Hashem. Like it says in Tanya, in the second volume, in Shar Yichud Amunah. This Amunah, this Amunah has been designated and is uniquely the way Yidden are supposed to believe. Because the nations of the world, even those that believe in Hashem, they refer to Hashem as the God of all gods. What does that mean? They are basically saying that Hashem is the first force, and the true source, to all other forces, limited forces, that come from him. So there are many forces that control the world, but Hashem, he's the father of all sources. He's the source of all sources. But they're recognizing and acknowledging that there are other forces. We call they recognize the world and perceive the world as something that has its own separate, independent identity. And they look at Hashem like the neshama that gives life to the guf. That's how Hashem gives life to the world. So therefore they attribute that there is a world and there are laws of nature and there's all these things. But Hashem is the superpower. He can override different things. And that's a different way of looking at Hashem. Avalhu Yis'ala Hamromam V'Nizgav Mizeh. Hashem, who's much higher than that. Hidiyanu Ha'emes. He teaches us in the Torah a deeper truth, and that is Kashem Echad, and Hashem is one. And Hashem is one doesn't just mean that He's one; it means He and the world are one. Ve'ein oid mamish. Nothing exists outside of Him. Ki kol ha'olam ayim ve'efes mamish. The whole world, the whole creation, the whole universe, everything is null and void. It's nothing without Him. V'lo ki guf l'neshama, and that, don't think of it as the neshama and the guf. Hashem is much, much greater than the world. Hashem gives life to the world not like the neshama gives life to the body, but Hashem who's infinite and He encompasses all the worlds. He gives life to the body. What does get invested into the worlds, that is just a small reflection of Hashem's speech, and that's called Mamala Kol Almim, and that's insignificant compared to Hashem Himself. So there's one more point here that I didn't mention before, and that is, if we talk about the neshama giving life to the body, which means there is a body, and how the neshama gives life to the body, so basically we're saying that the neshama is designed in a way that it could relate to the body and to the different organs of the body. For example, a person could see with their eyes. According to our belief that there's Hashem and there's a neshama, that means there's a power in the neshama, which is called the power of vision, and that power is invested in the eye. Why can't the power of vision be invested in the nose? Why can't the power of speech be in the ears? Why can't the koach hariyah be in the nose? Why can't the power of speech be in the ear? So what?
Hashem created us that way. It is what it is.
Okay, that's one way of answering the question, and that's the master key and the master answer to all questions.
He created us in His image.
What?
In His image. That's all He is. So why would we question His image?
Why are we questioning His image? I'm not questioning His image. The body has the image that it has, but I'm questioning the way the soul affects the body. Like this particular power of the soul, why can it only be in the eyes? Why can't it be in the ears? Why can a person see only through their eyes? If I would believe in science, that there is no soul and everything is just physical and biological, so obviously vision is only attributed to the eyes. But the way we see it from a Torah perspective, the power of vision is not the eye. The eye is only a vessel, a channel. The real power of vision is the soul. So why couldn't the soul transmit its power of vision through a different organ of the body? Because that's the real thing. That's my question.
Because each part of the body has a specific function.
Right, the part of the body is a different function, but the body is only technical. The real power lies in the soul. So why wouldn't it be possible to do the same thing but through a different organ in the body? I mean,
that soul is not choosing what it's doing.
what?
Like soul cannot choose.
Why not?
Because it's Hashem about it.
Hashem created the soul. What did you want to say?
That part of the body is not a vessel for a different light that is like shining. Like
Okay, so I want to explain what Nati just said. Just like every part of the body is designed differently, the eye is designed differently than the ear. Whoever studies science knows that there are so many details to the structure of the eye, the autonomy of the eye, and the same is with every organ in the body. So too, there's a structure to the powers of the soul. It's not a physical structure, but in a spiritual sense, each force and each faculty is different than the other. Remember, we spoke about this quite a few times, that any description that we know in the physical, which has different physical dimensions, the same description can exist in a spiritual sense. But it's not physical, but it's a similar kind of description. To give an example, people will say that what you just said is very deep. Deep or depth is the way you describe a closet. It's a very deep closet. It's a deep hole in the ground. What does it mean when you say it's a deep concept? Is there any relationship between the two words, or it's just borrowing a word that's not connected?
Where is it?
What?
There is a
What is the relationship?
because you're figuratively speaking. So if your words are the closet, then like there's depth to it. Like there are layers, and you can be in front of it, you can be at the entrance, inside, all the way at the back. So
Right.
for your thoughts.
So that's exactly what I'm saying. So the term depth, it's not like the really depth means a deep hole in the ground. I can also use it figuratively for something else. If you think of the concept of the word depth, it can apply to everything and anything, to emotion, to intellect, to all sorts of things. Of course, it can also apply to a deep pit in the ground. It can apply to a deep closet, but it could be a deep voice. But the concept of depth is the same everywhere. So there's depth, there's width, there's length, there's sharpness. If somebody says that this statement was a very sharp statement, it's not sharp with a knife. You can't cut a tree with a sharp statement, but you can cut somebody emotionally with a sharp statement because it's the same idea. It's sharp, it's pointy. We always use this example of somebody says, we had a meeting yesterday, but we didn't get anywhere. We're just going around in circles. So what do you think happened by the meeting?
They all stood up.
They all stood up, holding hands, and they were singing Ring Around a Rosie and went around the room. But they said we went around in circles. So a kid would hear that, he would imagine, oh, they all stood up and they're walking around in circles, like Simchas Torah, we circle. So the answer is there's a circle physically, and there's a circle which is figuratively mean. When you start at a certain point and you get back to where you were, that's a circle. So every description, whether it's a circle, whether it's length, whether it's width, whether it's depth, whether it's sharpness, whether it's flat, glossy, all these terms can also exist in a figurative way. So it says in a mime of the Rebbe Rashab, an incredible thing, that the description of the power of vision of the eye is so precise and so aligned with the physical description of the physical eye, that not even one iota different. Which means every detail that a doctor could describe to you about the structure of the eye, someone who has the knowledge of Ruchnis can describe to you that this is the power of vision. And therefore the power of vision can only function through the eye because it sort of won't fit anywhere else. It's like, why can I put a glove on my hand and why can't I use the glove for my feet? Because the glove is not designed to fit. The feet have a different shape and the glove has a different shape, but the right hand goes right into the glove. The expression in English is it fits like a glove. But the left hand won't fit that glove. It has to have a different description. So the power of vision has a description. The power has a form and a shape, and in a figurative way, in a spiritual way, and the same thing with all the powers. So therefore, what we're saying is that even though the neshama is so much greater than the body, but there is some relationship there, and it's some sort of limited way, because the form, the shape, the structure, the composition of the spiritual force is similar to the physical structure. But if I would say that about Hashem, that would mean the same about Hashem. He's also that way, that the energy invests in the flowers, and this is in humans, and this is in mountains, and this is in oceans, and this is in the heaven, this is in the earth. Every energy of Hashem is sort of a little bit different. That's why he says Hashem is way beyond that. He's Sefer Kolam, he's infinite. And he gives life to everything in a way that he's so much greater, not in any way limited or even similar to the physical creation. And that's where the creation really comes from. So the creation is totally batal to Hashem. On the other hand, there is a certain element of light that Hashem shines into each thing accordingly, like the neshama. And that light is a light and the energy of Hashem that flows into water in a way that it fits water, and different energy flows into humans and animals and trees and whatnot. But that's a much lower level. That's a ha'ara. That's only a reflection of Hashem's essence. Hashem's essence is infinite, and He creates the world yesh me'ayin. Understood? Or we're confused? Yes.
Can I draw a parallel?
Yeah.
A while ago during Shemot, we were talking about how all of us have a godly soul, but it's all part of the same godly soul. So technically we have the same godly soul. But then Rabbi Glick was talking about how like for us to feel unique, it has to manifest within each of us in a like slightly different way. So
As an individual.
As an individual. And so that thing you were just saying about how we all have like the same functions, but it like has to fit like our individual eyes are like we have
Very
the
good
same
parallel.
sense, we have the same senses, but all of us will taste maybe a little bit differently, or we'll see a little bit differently.
We all have our own flavor, our own perception, and that's what makes me me. And Hashem wants that. Hashem wants every individual to be an individual. But yet, in the source, we all come from one original source, which is higher than the individual and higher than the details. You know, the Rebbe would say this often, that in the Sefer Torah, we talk about unity, and if one letter of the Torah scroll is puzzle, and the whole Torah scroll becomes puzzle. That's how much we're united. On the other hand, there's another halacha that if two letters are touching, it's puzzle. Why? Because then they're not separate from each other. Every letter is an individual, which means as much as the Torah encourages us to be united and be one and we're all together, at the same time, the Torah tells each one of us to be an individual. I have my mind, my heart, my personality, my perception. I'm an individual, and Hashem wants me to serve Him in an individual way, the way I am, unique. Okay, so this is what he introduces here, the union of Seva Kolamim, and that's the ultimate Amunah. And on that basis, we can understand that the world is batal b'mitzias, totally batal to Hashem. Now he continues. Base. Now he's going to explain how this is connected to matzah, eating matzah. Zehu Mitzvas Achilas Matzah. This is the mitzvah of eating matzah. Shenetztavu b'nei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim. That the Yidden were commanded to eat in Mitzrayim. Ki Mitzrayim he mechusrei amunah hanal. While they were in Mitzrayim, they were lacking this amunah. They maybe could have had the general amunah that Hashem is the source of all sources, but not the kind of amunah that we just described. Hashem wanted to take us out of not the physical, geographic land Mitzrayim, but take us out of the Mitzrayim, meaning out of the nation, out of the ideal, out of the way of thinking of Mitzrayim, and bring us to a higher level of perceiving Him. To bring us to the true amunah, which is just described. And how is that happening? Are they hamatzah? This is accomplished through the matzah. Hanikra michel devei menusa. It's food of faith. Shabov al yoda, through the matzah yagiu v'tigba b'libaisam amunah zu. By eating matzah, this amunah will become embedded in our hearts. How does matzah do that? How does it come from matzah? After all, matzah is physical food. This will be understood based on the word of our sages. A child, a baby, isn't yet capable to say Abba ve'ima tam dogan, until he tastes the taste of grain, which means that initially a baby lives from the milk of the mother, no grain. Then comes a point where the baby starts eating food, solid foods. And once the baby starts eating solid foods, grain, that's when the brain starts developing to the point that they can say Abba or Ima, which means father or mother. Say Abba Ima. So basically, this is a physical, biological thing. Eating food develops the brain, and as a result of that, the child can say Abba Ima. the calling of Abba V'Ima Achati Moshe Tam Dagon that comes after tasting grain. Eino Yediv Asag Amitis. That doesn't mean that the child understands what is a father and a mother. So when you see a 1-year-old running around and saying to Abba or Ima or Tati or Mami, the child doesn't know what it is. He doesn't understand, oh, this is the person that gave birth to me, that brought me into the world. Or understand in general what is the significance of a father and a child. Does he understand that his very existence is part of the brain of the father? Does he understand that a father's compassion for his child is beyond anything that you could imagine? The father say to sustain the child, to give the child and provide him with all his needs, the dedication, the loyalty, the love that parents have to children. He doesn't know what it's all about. If you would ask a 1-year-old, could you explain to me what does it mean to be a father and a mother? You're talking to the walls. Nevertheless, we can't say that there's absolutely no recognition. He does recognize his parents in a very strong way, in an absolute way. He won't even go to anyone else. As we see with little children, they want their father and the mother. Anyone else walks into the room, they start shrugging their shoulders. The lips start bending in and out, and they start crying. They want their father and the mother. Some of them get hysterical. Now, you would think you're so hysterical and you want your father. Maybe you can explain to me, what is a father? What is a mother? They can't explain it. There's nothing to explain. They don't understand anything, but they're very attached. They do recognize that this is something that's connected to them in a very essential way. Means there's a knowledge here that's very deep. The understanding of what it means to be a father and a mother, physically, biologically, what it means to be a father and a mother emotionally, is something which is, very sad story, but I remember once was an incident that happened here in the community, unfortunately, where a young woman passed away. She had young children. And I overheard 2 little kids talking about it, little kids. And one said to the other that this is what happened with the mother. So the other one said, as something, I don't know what they said, but something along the line, so what? So the other child answered, who's going to prepare her clothes in the morning? Who's going to prepare the socks in the morning? So basically, when children speak about this, they don't even begin to scratch the surface of the depth of the relationship between a parent and a child, but they are speaking in some way. So what he's saying in the Maimer is that the real, true depth of parent-child relationship is found in the child's head in a very miniature way, so to speak. Let me see the words inside again. This knowledge, is the true knowledge, that's higher than the knowledge of the tinuk, of the child. It's invested in his brain in a very small, sort of miniature way, and in his perception. The child can't understand the true meaning of these words, of this concept, which is above his understanding. But Kriya Zu, when he calls his father and says Abba or Ima, Yesh Behelem Kol Inyan Amiti. In this call, in this cry, hidden is the whole depth of the relationship between the parents and children. Echshu Aviv, that what it means to be his father. But it's descended, so to speak. It's there in a very tzimtzumdik way. But in those words, Abba Ima, the way the child says it, and in this attachment that the child has to the father and the mother, lies all the depth of parent-child relationship, which the child can't understand. We would compare this to a parallel to this would be an example of this would be someone learns a halacha with a child, and he hides all the depth that's there. He tells it them briefly and just the halacha, do this or do that. Even the halacha is a little bit deep for the child, so he has to explain it to him how they mishalim midvarim tachtein. He has to give him a mashal of simple things, that the child should get it. Nevertheless, maskil psak halacha shu tachlis or mitis or inyan hamuskam aleyo amkus. In other words, when you have a halacha about matzah, we're getting ready for Pesach. There's laws about matzah. Now, this is a big, big discussion in Gemara. Beis Shammai says this, Beis Hillel says that, and they're arguing. Beis Shammai brings dozens of sources that prove his opinion. Beis Hillel brings dozens of sources that brings his opinion. They're arguing. Now, these two people, Shammai and Hillel, were brilliant beyond brilliance. We can't even imagine the kind of brilliance we're talking about. I mean, I want to give you an example. I want to remind you, I told you a story that there was, when the Alter Rebbe was arrested, you remember the story that he went out of the jail and he was in the house of the Misnagid. It's not sure it happened this time or the second time they was arrested, but at one point, one of the people who helped the Alter Rebbe was actually an opponent of the Alter Rebbe. And he asked the Alter Rebbe to give him a tkiyas kav, which means a promise that he's going to meet with three of the leading rabbis of the opposition. And the Alter Rebbe gave him that promise, and he met with three of the rabbis. One of them was one of the biggest Torah scholars of the generation, but he was a person that dismissed everybody because his knowledge of Torah was so vast and so brilliant that everybody was like little ants in his eyes. He just didn't respect anybody. And when the Alter Rebbe walked in, he didn't give much respect either. Then he was going to test the Alter Rebbe. You know what kind of question he asked him? How many times does it say Abaya and Rava in Gemara? Abaya and Rava are two people that their name is mentioned. I think they say you can't turn 3 pages in Gemara without having one of these two names. It's like Shammai and Hillel, but they were in a later generation. Abaya and Rava. So he asked him a question, how many times in the whole Shas, you know how big the Shas is? And to tell him how many times Abaya and Rava is mentioned in the Shas. And guess what? Alter Rebbe gave him an answer right away on the spot. And he said, no, you're off by 1. And Alter Rebbe says, no, I'm right, you're off by 1. And they went to look, and what he thought was Rava really said Rabba. The difference is one is spelled with an aleph, one is spelled with a hey. Tell me, which brain do you know that if you ask him a question at a volume of, let's say, a few thousand pages, they can tell you how many times this word is there? I know one thing that can do it. What? A computer. A computer, you put it in the computer, it'll tell you this is found in the Gemara 386,000 times. But nothing, a brain? You're talking about brains that are beyond our comprehension. And they're arguing, their argument is not about whether 2 + 2 = 4 or 2 + 2 = 16. That's deep, deep logic. Do we see things this way? Do we perceive it that way? And as a result of that, it comes down, okay, so now the halacha is that when it comes to Hanukkah, we follow the opinion of Hillel that you light the candles the first night 1, the second night 2, and the last night 8. Not like Shammai, who says the first night 8 and the last night 1. So when you're teaching a child and you teach him the halacha, really in that halacha that you're teaching him, all that depth, all the dialogues, all the discussion, everything that was going through in the yeshiva back and forth among these great giants, these mountains, all it's invested there. And in fact, when you come down to the halacha, that means that the halacha is that this way of perceiving things, this way of understanding things is correct. That's what you're telling the child. He has no clue what you're talking about. He just knows one thing. You're supposed to light the Hanukkah candles the first night 1, the second night 2, and the last night 8. So in this knowledge that he has, which is teeny, is all the depth of everything that is behind this halachic conclusion. right? So the Alter Rebbe is saying same thing here. In the knowledge, when the little child says, Tati, Mami, father, mother, Abba, Ima, in it is all the depth of what Abba, Ima is really all about, but it's in condensed, extremely condensed format. So just like it is with the halacha, let's do one more line on top of the page 3. L'cheinu kriyas Abba ve'ima, the same as with calling out Abba ve'ima, shatira koina adei tam dagon kanal. So number one, it's eating the grain that enables the child to be able to say Abba ve'ima. Number two, when he says Abba ve'ima, he really doesn't understand the depth. Number three, he doesn't understand the depth, but there is something there that he feels an attachment. And the next point is that in what he's thinking or what he's feeling, what's condensed in it is all the depth of what it really means, Abba ve'ima. And all this he's saying, we're going to use this as a mashal for Hashem and our Amunah. Any questions? Hope not, because the class is over. To be continued tomorrow.